The movie begins with Jules, a guy who spends his nights volunteering for a service called Walk Me Home. It's a program where he helps people get home safely, especially those walking alone at night. Jules isn't a cop, just a guy with a phone, making sure people are calm and safe until the police show up. One evening, Jules is busy taking calls when his phone buzzes again. It's a woman named Clara. She doesn't say anything at first, but Jules can tell from her shaky breathing that she's terrified. After some gentle prodding, Clara reveals that she's been threatened by the calendar killer, a notorious psychopath who has been terrorizing the city for months. 2 weeks ago, he gave her a twisted choice. Either she or her husband, Martin, would die. Jules, staying calm, tells her to find a safe place to hide, but Clara drops a bombshell. She can't go home anymore. Jules, sensing something's off, keeps talking to her until Clara admits she's been a victim of domestic abuse. When she told her husband Martin about the calendar killer's threat, he laughed it off, thinking it was a joke. He even told the cops that she was just imagining things. Frustrated, scared, and with nowhere to turn, Clara ran to her lake house. But things got worse there. She admits to Jules that she tried to take her own life. Jules is panicked but remains professional, begging her to hold on and not give up. Just then, Jules' dad calls to check on him, asking if he needs help with anything. Jules asked his dad to find Clara's lake house address because he wanted to rescue her. Well, that's what he let her believe. It was as if he'd watched one too many action movies and thought he was the hero. Jules' dad managed to track down the address, arriving at the lake house before Jules could even make his move. Meanwhile, Clara realized the calendar killer had found her hiding spot. She saw that he'd written her death date in blood again, this time on a glass door. It was as if he had a strange taste for interior decorating with blood. From a distance, Clara thought she saw her husband Martin, but it was Jules' dad. Panicking, she bolted out of the house before he could even explain. Clara ran for her life, but in true horror movie fashion, tripped and fell unconscious. Just when things seemed to be getting worse, a passerby named Hendrik came to her rescue and helped her into his car. But as they were about to drive off, a car screeched to a stop in front of them. It was Martin, the walking red flag. He dragged Hendrik out of the car and beat him up in the middle of the road. Up until that moment, it wasn't clear if Clara was truly being abused or if her mind was playing tricks on her. She had been diagnosed with dissociative disorder, and Martin used this to his advantage, convincing everyone that she wasn't mentally stable. Clara later told Jules a chilling story about Martin taking her to a secret club where powerful people engaged in twisted, non-consensual activities. It was like something out of a nightmare. Martin had spiked her drink, making it easier to manipulate her, but Clara managed to escape and reached out to Jules for help. Things became even clearer when Clara got into Martin's car. He continued gaslighting her, blaming her for his abusive behavior. He claimed that her very existence triggered his impulses. He also assaulted her again, telling her to behave herself, as if he wasn't the one who needed to take accountability. One of the most disturbing moments came when Martin forced Clara to eat seafood, knowing full well that she hated it. He used it as a way to control her. This showed that abuse isn't just physical, it's the mental toll of living in constant fear and having no control over your own life. Clara felt trapped, unsure of how to escape her monstrous husband's grip. The biggest twist came when Clara thought she had outsmarted Martin by locking him in the car and taking the keys. But when she entered her house, she was shocked to find Jules, the nice guy from the helpline, just chilling like he was invited. It turned out Jules had been tracking Clara's every move. He'd even kidnapped Vigo, the babysitter, and kept him captive for a long time. So it is now exposed that Jules was the calendar killer all along. Jules then gave Clara a twisted ultimatum. She had to kill Martin, her husband, or face a painful death herself. Clara tried to reason with Jules, explaining that she had already made up her mind to leave Martin, but Jules refused to believe her. His response was nothing short of a classic villain move, ignoring any semblance of reason just to keep the chaos alive. While this tense exchange unfolded, Martin, who had been trapped in the car, managed to smash the window and free himself. True to his stubborn nature, he stormed into the house without a plan, but his impulsive bravery didn't get him far. Jules easily overpowered him, making it clear that Martin's fighting skills were laughably ineffective, comparable to swinging a wet noodle in battle. In no time, Jules had both Clara and Martin tied up, solidifying his control over the situation. He turned his cold, menacing gaze toward Clara and issued a chilling ultimatum. She had until midnight to fulfill his demands, or he would end her life. The clock was ticking, and the room hung heavy with dread as Clara and Martin were left to face the grim reality of their predicament. Then came the shocking reveal of Jules's tragic past. His wife Deanna had endured years of horrific abuse at the hands of her father, leaving her deeply scarred and battling severe depression. Eventually, the weight of her trauma became too much, and Deanna ended her own life. In a desperate attempt to shield her children from witnessing the horrors, she had locked them in a room before taking her life. But fate dealt an even crueler blow. A fire broke out in the house, consuming nearly everyone. Only one of their children, Fabiana, survived the blaze, but her injuries were too severe. She passed away in the hospital shortly after, leaving Jules utterly shattered by the loss of his entire family. This unimaginable tragedy broke something inside Jules. Consumed by grief and anger, he began seeking out families where women were suffering from domestic abuse. But his sense of justice became horribly twisted. Jules would force these women into a horrifying decision: kill their abuser or face death themselves. What he saw as a way to avenge victims of abuse was, in reality, a cruel and monstrous cycle of violence, a grim reflection of the pain that had destroyed his own life. However, Jules's plan didn't go as expected. Just as he was about to kill Clara, his father, who had been following her since she left the lake house, burst in and shot him dead. Jules's father had realized his son was the calendar killer after recognizing his handwriting on one of the notes shown on TV. He knew Jules wasn't in a good mental state and had tried to help him, but it was too late. Jules had gone too far, and there was no saving him. Clara, now realizing she had to find a way out of her nightmare, knew staying with Martin was just asking for a lifetime of misery. She realized Martin wasn't the type to lose sleep over whether she survived his abuse. If Clara disappeared, Martin would probably blame bad vibes and move on to ruin someone else's life. Martin had power and influence as the Secretary of State, so Clara knew going to the authorities wouldn't help. She needed solid evidence, something undeniable that would expose him publicly, something that even Martin's charm couldn't twist his way out of. And that's exactly what Clara did. In a brilliant move during a heated argument with Martin, Clara secretly turned on the voice recorder on her phone. Martin had just assaulted Hendrik and forced him into his car, and the tension between him and Clara was at its peak. As their argument escalated, Martin let his guard down and confessed to abusing her. Clara, knowing she finally had the evidence she needed, held onto the recording until the perfect moment. When Martin went to the media, playing the victim and accusing the infamous calendar killer of attacking him, Clara struck back. She released the recording, and the world listened in shock as Martin's own words exposed his abusive behavior. His carefully crafted reputation crumbled in an instant, burning away faster than the empty excuses he tried to offer. Public outrage was swift, and authorities had no choice but to act. Martin was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 5 years in prison. While 5 years might not seem like a long time, for Martin it was 5 years where he couldn't hurt anyone else. For Clara, it was a hard-fought victory, a moment where justice, however imperfect, had finally been served. Martin's public fall was fast and hard. His lies burned faster than his seafood joke, and the world finally saw him for who he was. Meanwhile, Clara emerged victorious. She had broken the cycle of abuse, exposed the lies, and let the truth be known. With that, she proved that even in the darkest times, there's a way out. The story also made it clear that abuse is not just physical, it's the emotional and mental toll that keeps victims trapped, and it's up to society to support them. Now, Martin would serve his time, but for Clara, the world was finally her own again, and the movie ends here. If you enjoyed this recap and want more updates, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next.